In late 1992, the ruling National Party and the ANC were trying to break a deadlock that had stalled negotiations for 2 years. The National Party was insisting on compulsory power sharing that would give the white minority blocking powers at every level of government. The ANC demanded straightforward majority rule. While the white extremists boycotted the negotiations, the two major players got together.
We started having what we call boss berats, that is, talks away in the bush between the ANC and the government to try and thresh out outstanding issues.
It was probably for many of our ANC counterparts the first time that they flew in government aeroplanes. It was also significant because it was the first time that we flew together in any aeroplane whatsoever.
They went to a remote game lodge. One of the ANC negotiators was Joe Slovo, chairman of the Communist Party. The party had been allied with the ANC for decades. Slovo was on the ANC's executive. He had supported the Soviet invasions of Czechoslovakia and Afghanistan. As chief of staff of the ANC's armed wing, he had sent guerrillas into action and made fiery funeral speeches.
Once and for all, those who are responsible for so much mourning.
Slovo's reputation still sent shivers down the spines of government members at the conference.
I went to the swimming pool and found a stranger in the swimming pool, and I wanted to walk away from it when I discovered that this was Joe Slovo. Slovo noticed me, and I had no option but to join him. Now that I felt extremely uncomfortable about, because Joe Slovo, the communist, the terrorist, what would my late father have said about this? A staunch policeman, terrorist hunter, his son in the swimming pool with this communist terrorist.
But Slovo, now ill with cancer, had surprised everyone by revealing himself to be a pragmatist. Writing in a party journal, he had proposed a compromise to break the deadlock, a sunset clause in the new constitution which would provide for compulsory power sharing for a fixed number of years, before fading out like the setting sun. At the Bush conference, the National Party showed interest.
We realized that in the final instance, the major breakthrough that we have to make in this country was to find a settlement with the ANC. That's the reality.
We used to go in for a degree of jollification in the evenings, spend a bit of time in the pub together at night, and obviously when you are negotiating with people and you create that kind of social rapport, things become easier, and you get to know them, you get to understand each individual a little better.
During the conference, tentative agreement was reached on arrangements for organizing a free and fair election.
It was the beginning of the process that eventually led us to an agreement and to a new constitution.
So Joe Slovo has been very instrumental in advocating a system where we could remove the fears of the minorities in the country and also moderate the arrogance of a majority, of a black majority.
Formal negotiations began soon after in the World Trade Center near Johannesburg. The ANC and government agreed that the power-sharing coalition of major parties that would run the country would last for 5 years. Other parties had to accept.
There were, at the multi-party talks, 26 parties altogether. But every level-headed South African knew that essentially the settlement would come through what the government and the ANC could agree upon or not. The one had the power and the other one had the majority support.
The carve-up between ANC and National Party angered Afrikaners of the right wing, dominated by the Conservative Party.
You can see this process of ANC National Party cooperating against the rest. For example, if there's some problems or suddenly there's a veto or something that's just got stuck, then firstly Slovo will pick it up. And you can see he sort of writes a small note to Ramaphosa. Ramaphosa would then wink for Rolf Meyer, and the two of them will go outside. They would formulate some sort of proposal, come back, the one would propose, the other one would second it, and it was just being forced through.
We maintained a very close link with our principals. And I think we followed very much the same pattern in that regard. I reported to FW, and he reported to Mandela, but very much on the same basis. Very close line, very hands-on.
The double act became known as the Rolf and Cyril Show. Negotiators agreed that an election should be held the following April. With the ANC growing in confidence and looking certain to win the election, the National Party had retreated bit by bit on nearly all its power-sharing demands. One remained. The National Party insisted that its white minority ministers must have the power to block ANC decisions in cabinet. They called this governing by consensus.
So the key question now was, now what will they do in cabinet? To what extent will they be in a position to influence or even to veto particular decisions?
It was the one issue on which the ANC was not prepared to make a concession on. That is, the cabinet should be able to take decisions by majority rather than by consensus as they had originally wanted it.
When the last day of the conference came, Ramaphosa was convinced the government negotiators, headed by Rolf Meyer, couldn't afford to take the blame for a breakdown.
We therefore realized that this was their weak point and pressed on very hard until we finally got them to agree in the very early hours of the morning to that cabinet should be able to take decisions by majority rather than on a consensus basis.
This meant that if the ANC won the election, it would run the government. The proposal was put to the existing cabinet for endorsement.
It was indicated that no voting, in fact, would take place, which would mean that our representatives in cabinet would be in a position to influence, to persuade, but would have no final say or veto of any kind. And I disagreed with that.
Delport raised the issue with President de Klerk.
It was a very emotional moment for me. I think it was also an emotional moment for State President de Klerk. I voiced the concern that we maybe eventually end up as National Party being co-opted into an ANC government.
I took the decision and gave the lead that what we should go for is what is now in the Constitution, namely that there will be no voting.
De Klerk argued that the deal was in the best interests of South Africa. Some cabinet colleagues were less sure.
Die basiese beginsels van magsdeling, dat minderheidsgroepe werklike inspraak sou hê om besluitneming te beïnvloed. Dit het nie werklik gematerialiseer nie. Die verste wat ons kan gaan is om te sê dat ons het 'n teenwoordigheid onderhandel in die kabinet en ons kan waarskynlik by force of presence kan ons besluite probeer beïnvloed.
As the conference wound up with the ANC triumphant, Ramaphosa celebrated his 41st birthday.
I was able to see Rolf Meyer for the first time dancing on the floor where we were having this party. He was quite happy, he was quite jovial, and I kept wondering whether I would have been as happy as he was if I was in his position, having finally given in the way that they had.
Key National Party negotiators were satisfied they had struck a workable deal with an adversary they had grown to trust. Now the election could proceed.